Well, in Saudi Arabia, it's the city of Neom, which was once a desert area, just springing back to life. Actually, it's not springing back to life; it's springing to life. And this is a multi-million, if not billion-dollar city. And the reason I think this is very significant is Saudi Arabia, when you look at a map, is not too far from Babylon. And Brandon, you and I take the position that Babylon means Babylon.
Yep.
Babylon has to come back to life. And one of the criticisms that we faced on this, I know I faced this, is, oh, come on, the city of Babylon described in the book of Revelation, chapters 17 and 18, could not come into existence to worldwide proportions that fast. And I'm saying, yes, it could. It's happening right now with nearby Neom in Saudi Arabia. And it's also happening with nearby Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Dubai is right next to Iraq, as is Saudi Arabia. And so if a city can go from nothing to something, why can't it happen for the city of Babylon? That's the significance of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
A revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The line's communities are organized in 3 dimensions within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. Travel end to end in 20 minutes. Designed by world-leading architects, the line is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade. The line is designed as a series of unique communities, providing equitable views and immediate access to the surrounding nature. At the heart of the globe's key trade routes, a place for commerce and communities to thrive. The Line, the city that delivers new wonders for the world.
Wow. Wow. All right, that's pretty fascinating video. I guess most of you could probably put it into YouTube and find it. I'll tell you the name if you want to check it out yourself. It's called Neom, Neom. What is the line? ? Neom, Neom, and then what is the line? ? Wow, it really just shows you how quick something can happen, which again, for those who are saying, well, it can't be Babylon, literal Babylon, because nothing's really going on there. Dubai, now Neom, these cities can be built and come about pretty quick, can't they, Dr. Woods?
And it's not just cities, but it's cities in that region of the world.
No, it went from the desert to what you saw in that video. And there's 2 reasons why that's prophetically significant. Number one, it's an answer to the objection that Babylon cannot be literal, because a city in that part of the world, cannot be rebuilt or built that fast. Well, that objection is nonsense, because look at Neom, and which is in the same region as Babylon. And we can also throw into the mix Dubai of the United Arab Emirates, was rebuilt fast in a similar fashion. So we're expecting Babylon to be rebuilt in like manner in fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And number 2, the reason it's significant is what is happening in Saudi Arabia because of Neom and because of another issue that we might talk about later, is Saudi Arabia is becoming very, very wealthy. So when Ezekiel 38 and 39 happens, when you study Ezekiel 38, verse 13, Sheba and Dedan, that's Saudi Arabia, will protest the invasion. Why will they protest the invasion? Because the invaders are disrupting the New World Order that's making Saudi Arabia wealthy. And so that's why a video like that, that I sent you, is prophetically significant for those 2 reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the Bible tells us, Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, the 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on earth, which will be different from all other kingdoms. and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. Revelation 13 talks about no one will be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark, and it all seems to be setting up Satan's original state and his first sin. I will be like God, the 5 statements, I will, I will, I will, I will, I will, by Satan, Isaiah 14. And so let's get into all this and an update from Dr. Andy Wood. All right, Dr. Wood, so the Bible tells us this one world system's coming. The World Economic Forum is helping push it. Give us the latest World Economic Forum update you've got, please.
Well, these are just a collection of quotes. This comes from an article in the Western Journal. And, basically these are quotes that I've actually heard you play on your show. But these are quotes from Dr. Yuval Noah Harari, and you're probably well familiar with the quote I'm about to read. He makes a statement here that humans are hackable animals. He makes a statement here that science is replacing evolution by natural selection with evolution by intelligent design. And then he says, not intelligent design of some god above the clouds, but our intelligent design and the intelligent design of our clouds. The IBM cloud, the Microsoft cloud, these are the new forces of evolution. And he goes on and he talks about how we're upgrading humans into gods. And the reason I have that particular slide there from Isaiah 14, verses 12 through 15, is that's the section of Scripture that immediately came to my mind when I read these quotes, because that's what Satan originally did. He lifted himself above the clouds. The clouds there in Isaiah 14 would represent God's glory. And it's very difficult for me not to see a satanic agenda in the World Economic Forum when one of its key advisors is talking about, lifting humanity above the clouds. Not the cloud where God dwells. God is a myth. Jesus in the Bible is fake news. But this cloud of transhumanism that they're pushing us towards.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of this, of course, with the World Economic Forum that you're talking about is they want us to eat bugs. You've seen that, right? The World Economic Forum wants to eat bugs. The other night on the Worldview Report, I talked about now they're producing food now with crickets. Crickets. I don't know if you've seen that or not. Have you, Andy?
I've seen parts of that, yeah.
Yeah. So part of getting a control of us and doing away with capitalism includes private property. Remember, you'll own nothing by 2030 and be happy. Getting rid of the free market system. It's big government, big business, the public-private partnerships. Well, Dr. Robert Malone has a brand new article out that is now just 23 hours old. Not even 24 hours old yet. And he provides a graph, a chart right here in his Substack. Protecting 30% of the U.S. by 2030 would require 440 million more acres to be set aside. Look at that graph for those watching by television. It says 2020, 12%. But what do they want? That's 289 million acres protected for biodiversity. So right now, they got 289 million acres protected in the U.S. The goal, that was at 2020. The goal by 2030 is 729 million acres, 30%. Now, this is coming from the USGC Defenders of Wildlife group. Now, here is the actual PDF, okay? There's a PDF. Let me see if I can find it back here real quick. Right, there's a PDF that goes along with this plan, and here it is. This is their plan. Conserving and Restoring America the Beautiful, 2021. A preliminary report to the National Climate Task Force recommending a 10-year, locally led campaign to conserve and restore the lands and waters upon which we all depend and that bind us together as Americans. Now, this is not conspiracy, folks. Represented agency protecting 30% of America's land and ocean by 2030. So I guess you're going to certainly kiss fishing goodbye and whatever 30% they decide. You can kiss farming goodbye. And again, we've already seen their own chart where by 2030 they want to buy up the land.
Well, my thoughts are it goes right along with an article I sent you by Simon Kent, July 22nd, 2022. The title of it is World Economic Forum, Ditch Your Car and save the planet.
Yes.
And this particular article talks about the end of private ownership. It talks about how the World Economic Forum is not alone in nudging Americans and others around the world this direction. The International Energy Agency is pushing this, and it talks about packing people into higher density cities under a climate plan that will supposedly revolutionize people's lifestyles and behaviors in order to avert the climate apocalypse. The fact of the matter is these globalists, and the article is very good in saying they're unelected, have our whole lives planned out. You know, what kind of car we're going to drive, where we're going to live, and you're talking about how they've already, in their minds, confiscated, lands and water areas in the United States. And we are, truly under a globalist incursion. Prophetically, that doesn't surprise me, because that's what Daniel chapter 7, verse 23 predicts at the end of the age. There would arise a totalitarian one-world government, and that would be the final phase of Gentile rule before the second advent of Christ. So as the world moves in this direction, the Bible reader is not surprised by it.
No, absolutely not. And they openly state that they're looking for legislation in cities, and apparently you got a bunch of mayors that are going to go along with it now that we see they want to take over 30% of our land in America and set it aside for conservation. So a lot of mayors will go along with it. And what they want to do, according to the plan, is make it where it actually would be illegal to drive cars, let's say, on Sunday. On Sunday, you can't even drive a car. And then they want to make roads that no cars can go on unless it's an electric car. So if you have a fossil fuel car, you can't even go on those roads. I mean, the ways they're going to put in policies that force people out of fossil fuel. And contained in the order is the 30 by 30 program, a radical and aggressive push forward by environmental and climate change activists to put 30% of the land and water in the United States under permanent protection by 2030. But what 30% of land will states and private landowners be forced to hand over? In Nebraska, where 97% of the state is privately owned property, that number is especially alarming. Gates is considered, the article says, the largest, this is Dr. Malone writing, private owner of farmland in the country, as he owns more than 269,000 acres across dozens of states. He continues to gobble up farmland and waterways as quickly as he can find land and water for sale. One has to wonder if he has cut some sort of deal with the Biden White House and administrative state to help augment the 30 by 30 plan. If so, that would mean if some of the best farmland and the most important waterways in the U.S. were to be taken out of commission in the near future, farmland and waterways bought because it was for sale without any serious thought to the consequences to American families just trying to buy food. When 30% of the land, water in the U.S. is no longer available to farmers, what do you think is going to happen? What does it mean when 30% of the water is not available for drinking or agriculture by 2030? Gog Magog. And, of course, if you guys want to get some more information on this, Dr. Andy Woods has a book called The Middle East Meltdown. The Middle East Meltdown. The coming Islamic invasion of Israel. So we have all these nations the Bible talks about in Ezekiel 38, verses 1 through 17, Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all of these different stands, Russia, Iran, Sudan, Libya, Syria, these nations, all Turkey, coming against Israel. And here's a headline, Dr. Woods, that you wanted to bring up today. Israel gears up to fight as Russia puts screws to Jewish agency for unclear reasons. Tell me about this, Dr. Woods.
Well, this is interesting because it's dealing with a Jewish agency in Russia that actually was playing a role in helping Jewish people get out of Russia and get out of Ukraine and to go back to Israel. And the Russian government has basically argued that this Jewish agency is violating some kind of local law. And all the people quoted in the article say it's a very mild violation and it could have been worked out just with some diplomacy and negotiation, but the Russian government is actually using this to exasperate the situation. And consequently, what you have is tension between Russia and Israel. In fact, here's a line from that article. It says the lawsuit is disappointing news, whatever the basis is, and appears to be a step back in relations between Russia and Israel. And I find that very interesting because Russia will invade Israel in the last days, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39. A prophecy like that just can't come into, existence out of nowhere. The stage has to be set. So, marked deterioration in the relationship between Russia and Israel is a stage setter for that invasion. And I believe it's setting the stage aggressively right now for the Gog Magog invasion.
Absolutely. So just to make it clear, this agency in Russia helped Russian Jews get into Israel. And now that's been shut down, which means those Russian Jews aren't getting the assistance they need to move from Russia to Israel. And so basically one has to wonder if they're about to grab up these Jews and use them as hostages against Israel.
Yeah, in fact, if you look at the very last line in that article, it says Moscow's moves against the organization have evoked memories of the plight of the Soviet Jews who were trapped behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War, barred from immigrating to Israel or freely practicing their faith. So, there's a history there, and very sadly, what Russia is doing with this Jewish agency is bringing back this Cold War tension.
Let's talk about this next graphic you've sent. It's a map of Israel, Jordan. We see Jerusalem. Then we see the Golan Heights, and we see a buffer zone. Explain to me what your point here is as you highlight the Golan Heights.
Well, the Golan Heights is a big deal because that's a mountainous region that separates Israel from Syria. Syria, of course, there's a presence, I'm going to call them the big three, in Syria. Russia, Iran, and Turkey have a presence in Syria. And so, what's standing between the big three and Israel, this little mountainous region called the Golan Heights. And that's very interesting because Ezekiel over and over again says when the invasion happens, the mountains, it says this over and over again in those chapters, 36 of Ezekiel, 37, 38, 39, it says the mountains of Israel will be invaded. Not just Israel, but the mountains of Israel. And I think the Golan Heights, furnish that mountainous region. And I think things were really kicked into high gear when Donald Trump essentially allowed Israel to annex the Golan Heights. He didn't take the international view that the Golan Heights, is some kind of international zone. He took the view that the Golan Heights belonged to Israel. And so now the stage is set for the specific fulfillment of God's word, where the big three from the north, keep in mind where the big three are, they're in Syria on Israel's northern border, will go into the mountains of Israel. And so it's just shocking to me how sharp a focus is coming now into existence in our time concerning Bible prophecy.
World Economic Forum, Gog Magog, and now our third point today in our prophecy update is Babylon. Now, we've touched on that a little bit. Dr. Woods also has a book on this one, Babylon, bookends of prophetic history. And you may say, well, why bookends? Because we got Genesis 10 and 11 speaking about Babylon when it was created in the Tower of Babel. God confused their language, spread them over the world. And then Revelation 17 and 18 tells us it's all going back to Babylon, the mother of harlots. And we believe the false world religions largely were birthed there with that mother-son cult out of Babylon. I go into this in great detail in my 500-page book, The Coming Religious Reich. So here's a map, Saudi Arabia. For those watching by television, you can see Dubai and where it is on the map. And that brings us to Neom, which, again, we just did the video. We kind of started out with that, and now we're kind of ending with that. But, Dr. Woods, this is a very interesting quote you provide. A prince's $500 billion desert dream, flying cars, robot dinosaurs, and a giant artificial moon. Do you want to read from this, or you want me to read it?
Well, I mean, I just kind of summarize it. I mean, this is a 2019 article. I actually quoted this in my book, Babylon, the Bookends of Prophetic History, showing the how credible it is for a city in that part of the world to arise overnight. I mean, that's what's happening with Neom, and that's why that video that I just found, actually someone sent it to me, involving what's happening in Neom, why that's so significant. I mean, if Neom can emerge out of nothing overnight, so can Babylon. Talks about a building that's going to be taller than the Empire State Building. So tall buildings, what does that remind us of? Something I've read about in the Bible, where they built a tower, to reach into heaven in Babylon. And so what Satan, I think, is going to do in the last days is he's going to reincarnate essentially what he was trying to do at the Tower of Babel back in Genesis chapter 11. And I'm just trying to demonstrate that arguing this way is a very credible scenario, because other cities in the region are building these high towers, and they're coming into existence overnight. Dubai being one in the UAE, and Neom being another one in Saudi Arabia.
Well, and then slide 20, it states here, Saudi Arabia will open its airspace to all airlines, connecting 3 continents. And then at some point, Babylon, Iraq, will be the hub of trading. And that's what the Bible tells us, isn't it?
Yeah, see, this is a big deal. This is another angle that we haven't talked about yet concerning Saudi Arabia, where they've just opened, there's a press release right there that you can see. They've just opened their airspace to all airlines connecting 3 continents. Now, that's very important because, remember, Sheba and Dedan will protest the invasion. And obviously Saudi Arabia, in such a position, will protest the invasion because she likes the New World Order. And she's becoming rich because of the New World Order, because her airspace is connecting all 3 continents together. And as you keep traveling north, who else do those 3 continents impact? They impact the city of Babylon. In fact, if you look at slide number 21, this is something that Henry Morris said in his Revelation commentary going back to the 1980s. He says he talks about how Babylon would be an ideal location for a world capital, and he makes the point that it is within the navigable distance of the Persian Gulf and is at the crossroads of the 3 great continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Now, what has Saudi Arabia done? She's just opened the door to those 3 continents. Is it too far-fetched to think that that wealth would spread northward into the city of Babylon, which also is the, essentially the midpoint or the connector between those 3 continents? So I'm just trying to show that the rebuilt Babylon scenario, as you look at the headlines, is completely and totally credible.